Okay. So thanks again for joining. How we're gonna start is we'll do a quick around the room introductions. Name either organization or who you're representing or what you're representing, whatever feels right to you. And then you'll answer one short question, one thing that made you smile today. So we will go around the room and then I'll share a little bit more of the agenda and the context, and then we'll jump into the questions themselves. But I can start. My name is Becky Jakes-Hassick. I am a program director at Health Plus Studio. And one thing that made me smile, I got to spend time with my sweet nephew and met my new niece, who I haven't yet met before this morning. And she is 2 months and like the chunkiest little babe I have ever seen. So that made me really smile this morning. And so we can just, how about after you go, you can kick it to the next person. So how about Jose? Can I turn it to you to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello, my name's Jose. I am a proud father of 2 children, and my happy moment this morning was them running half awake. They hear me leaving, but they have to give me a goodbye hug. And that is always my the good and bad, why I go to work and why I'm in this world, for raising them. And specifically why I'm here as a father, but I also work in the WIC program. I've been about 12 years overall on my journey here with WIC. And I work frontline with WIC and talk to families. And just a little bit about me as well. I got encouraged and have been doing some conscious fathering classes. And that's what led me to here. When I heard about this topic, I was very, very interested to give conversations, because, not to take too much space, but conscious fathering is a group of 10 dads for early birthing. We bring them in for a 4-hour class, talk about relationships a lot, and this is a lot of the focus. So
wonderful. Thanks, Jose. And do you mind passing it to the next person?
Right next to me, Steven.
Thanks, Jose. Stephen, I'm part of the Washington Fatherhood Council and part of the Family Collaborative Network, as well as the steering committee. Something that made me smile today. So there's times when I have my son Tuesday and Saturdays currently with my custody plan, and there are days where like I miss him after I've had him, right? And his mom let me have him for Halloween this year, so I had him 2 nights in a row, and I'm just used to having him around. And so yesterday was a little bit, they feel that empty space, and was feeling that this morning after I got some work done. I just kept looking at pictures and videos that I've taken over the last couple of days, and something that made me smile is I kept replaying this video, because my mom, there's a little pumpkin, she made like a jack-o'-lantern face, and it wasn't that good. And so he wanted me to make one the other day, and I took a video of it. I like thought to record it, and it's so cute because I was like, oh, you want me to make a jack-o'-lantern? And he goes, it's for grandmas. And like it was so cute, because he wanted me to make it for my mom. And like just seeing the connection that he's forged with my mom, and the way he looks at her now is amazing. So that's what made me smile. I will pass it over to Dieter.
Hi, Dieter Jacobs. First and foremost, I have 2 amazing boys. I'm a single father of 2. They're not boys anymore. They're young men who are doing amazing things. I've spent my life working in group homes right out of college, spent years working at the Division of Child Support, and now currently am blessed to work with Anne at the Fatherhood Council. I've been doing that full time. I was the liaison for several years from the Division of Child Support. Now I'm a full-time person there. So it's wonderful to be here. What made me laugh? So my 19-year-old, the one in the glasses, is living with me. He goes back and forth with his mom at will. He's out of high school now, so he kind of decides where he wants to go. And I woke up at 4 a.m. and noticed his light was on in his room, and I went in there and tried to find him in my haze, and he had fallen asleep in the chair watching Game of Thrones. And when I woke him up and told him to go to bed, he's like, "Dad, they're killing everybody. My God." And I'm like, "Yeah, buddy. Yes, they are. Welcome to the Game of Thrones. You're only on season 4. It only gets worse. Go to bed. You might want to go to bed now." Oh yeah. He kind of staggers into his bed. So I was like, wow, okay. but I had to chuckle and then get myself back to get some sleep after getting him in there. So I'm like, yep, that's what they do, son. If you haven't figured it out by now, don't get too attached to anybody. So I will gladly pass this on to Ron.
Well, good morning. I'm Ron Howenstein, the founder and president of Spokane Fatherhood Initiative, member of the Washington Fatherhood Council. I provide adult supervision for Anna and Dieter when necessary. And father of 2 adult children here. And today what's making me smile is everything works, from the first cup of coffee at 6 to multiple trips to the bathroom to technology. It's been a great day so far. At my age, those are important things.
I love
Ron,
you.
I'm passing it to the next
I'll
person.
pass it on to Nikki.
Yeah. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Nikki Sherman. I'm part of the steering committee involved in this work, and I represent the organization Reach Out and Read on that. Yes, some of you have heard of that. What's made me smile? I'm going in the other direction. I'm going with my father. My father has suffered from loneliness and depression a little bit in the last few months, and we've been making an effort to try and keep his mood up. He lives on his own, and you know what it's like. He's 88, and we've started up a family WhatsApp where we all do the Wordle every day and post our results so that we all join in. And my dad is quite competitive, and today he managed to get the word in 2. And he was definitely happy with that result, as we saw from the WhatsApp. So lovely to see his mood high and him enjoying that.
Thanks, Nikki. Do you mind passing it?
Yes, let me pass on to, I'm sorry, I'm looking for names here. Angie.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I am Angie. I participate on the Fatherhood Council and also work at the Washington State Department of Health, supporting their child health initiatives with a focus on 0 to 11. My background is actually in prevention science, so brain development and early relational health are right up my alley. So pleased to be here. And what made me smile this morning was knowing that I get to start my day actually with this conversation. It's for sure a break in my regular routine, and it's an area that is really important to me. So any excuse that I have to come together with like-minded folks to share and learn is always great. So thanks for the opportunity. And I will pass it to Anne.
Good morning, I'm Anne. Becky and I met many moons ago when I was doing early brain science into policy in the Department of Social and Health Services across all the state of Washington. Tell me that wasn't just the most huge and overwhelming role ever. And that turned into a very intentional and unapologetic focus on fathers, and one of the founding mothers of the Fatherhood Council. And I would differ with you, Steve, that we don't have any dads here. We have 4 dads here, and we have dads who are on our council and who work with our council. And then Angie, who is one of our great partners. So this is a really amazing group of folks to work with. And I drank the Kool-Aid around early relational health 20 years ago with David Willis, when he and I were tromping around Oregon trying to get people to pay attention to that in the primary care setting. So my happy always is this little chick. We have a new grandbaby who just turned 1, and here is her her harvest. She's been working hard on these delicata squash, but my smile and my happy moment this morning was getting a picture from her mama in her little bright orange snowsuit, and she's got a few words, and so she's like going like this, and I said, "What is that?" She goes, "That's her snows suit." That's her snowsuit. This is a Ron moment. Come on, Ron. I did a joke. Give me some cred here, dude. Yeah, so it's just the most amazing ride to get to go through babies again, but as a grandmom, it is so dang cool. Although your kids leave you when they have other families, but that aside, grandbabies are a big smile. And so that's what made me smile this morning. Sarah.
Hi there. So nice to see everyone, meet everyone. My name's Sarah Marks. I'm with Health Plus Studio. And have been part of this ERH work for since we started the steering committee. And it's great to get to meet so many different people. I'm your neighbor to the south. Most of you, I'm in My smile this morning relates to the father of my children. He is an early riser and really holds himself back every morning, waiting for somebody else to wake up in the house. And this morning, our daughter came into bed saying she had a nightmare. And I was just gonna like make her be quiet and lie down and fall asleep. And he was so excited that she was there that he started playing with her in bed. And they were being so cute, trying to be quiet, but still trying to giggle. I couldn't be mad, but I wanted to. Let's see, who can I pass? Who hasn't gone? Dana, have you gone? No.
No, hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Dana Long, and I am a primary care pediatrician. Most of my patients are 0 to 5-year-olds. I work in a federally qualified health center in Oakland, California. I'm a professor of clinical medicine at UCSF, and I found and I direct our UCSF Center for Child and Community Health, but I'm also on the steering committee. So what made me smile is that I'm a single mom. I have 3 amazing boys ranging in age from 10 to 18. And my senior is he's about to leave, right? He's getting all these college admissions. And so I know that every morning when I go into his room to wake him up, like I'm not going to have that next year. And so I'm really just trying to enjoy the moments.
Yeah. God, that can make me cry. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I'm like, I can't even imagine that phase of life of saying goodbye to them. I mean, it must feel amazing too, but yeah.
Don't blink. It will happen before you know it, Becky.
I know, it's true. Well, thank you so much all for joining today. We're so excited for this conversation, and thank you to Stephen for organizing this group. Let me share a little bit of context setting, and then we can kind of jump in to the questions that we have for this group. So Sarah and I will be facilitating this session. And just to say a couple words about Health Plus Studio, we're a social impact agency. We typically partner with mission-driven organizations, a range of organizations, to improve the design, engagement, and impact of strategies that promote health and well-being. So we've been working closely with David Willis and the team at CSSP, which is acting as the backbone organization, as you likely know, to advance this early relational health movement. And one piece of the work we're supporting on is this collective action work, which is all about bringing together cross-sector leaders to advance early relational health for all families. So as part of that process, we're going what we're calling through a co-discovery process, learning about what are the opportunities, what are the potential barriers or challenges in doing this work around early relational health. And that could be at a family level, community level, program, system, right? We're kind of looking at the full ecosystem here. So the idea is we kind of learn from our steering committee members, 12 members from a variety of different fields and perspectives. And now we wanted to broaden that aperture, really understanding from different communities what they're learning about early relational health, kind of what it is, what's supporting it, what's potentially getting in the way. So we're really excited to be able to learn from you and the work that you guys are all doing around advancing children and family health, whether that's in your own family or beyond. And as I said at the beginning, we do have some members here from the steering committee. There are other members who will be watching the recording after the fact. So thank you for allowing us to do that. Sarah and I will be primarily asking the questions throughout, but we'll certainly open it up to steering committees, to all members to also ask questions and save some time at the end to do so as well. And we'd love to have this feel as much as a dialogue, a conversation as possible, not feel so interviewee. So please feel free to ask each other questions to build off each other. We really want to make this feel conversational and informal in some ways. So before I jump into posing the first question, any questions about who we are or why we're asking you all to join us today? No? Okay, great. So let's jump in. As we mentioned, and we sent an email and in preparation for today, we're really focused, this group, on building a movement around what we are calling early relational health. It sounds like some of you are longstanding members of this movement. Maybe that term or that terminology is new to some of you. But when you hear that phrase, early relational health, what does that mean to you? And I will let folks just kind of jump in and popcorn, and I can certainly invite folks to participate if we haven't heard your voice yet. But when you hear the term early relational health, what does that mean to you?
To me, the first thing that jumps out to is knowing that I perceive this definition this way. The biological connection that you as a parent will have is there, but the emotional connection is nurtured from day one. And that's how I have always tried to remind myself of this kind of terminology to my head.
So
Really
I always think about it in relationship to dads now. In my world, I hear many, many stories where the opportunity to create the bond and the attachment between babe and dad has been disrupted by lots of trauma and lots of things that happen in their lives, and a bias in our culture that dads are there to pay the paycheck and not to be nurturers. So I think about early relational health in terms of how do we change that narrative, and how do we help fathers understand the value that they bring to their child, and the need that they have for that relationship, and that is above all what's important, that all the rest will come. But that what we're doing right now is disrupting that, all of those expectations of becoming a dad, and all of the, skin to skin at birth, and all of the things that will nurture that in the first few years are very, very challenging for lots and lots of dads. And so part of when I hear this about fathers, it makes me sad, because I know a lot of dads have missed that and are trying to regrow that connection. But it is critical. It's critical for us to support that in breaking cycles across all the different domains. So I always think about it in terms of the big picture. You got to know that.
Absolutely. Nikki, please go ahead and ask a question, and then we'll...
Yeah, and I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. I'm interested, is it changing? I mean, if I think of my dad, who I've mentioned already, and I know that, I mean, he was quite good at the nurturing piece, but it wasn't an expectation of his. But then I think with my husband, it was more of an expectation. Do you think as we go through the generations that it's becoming more of an expectation, or do you think it's still just really things? Yeah, interesting. You think?
Yeah, when you look at the data, dads spend more time with their kids in this generation, more than they did in any prior generation since we've been keeping track. So we are definitely on the right track. But what I'm talking about more, Nikki, is the hardwired systems that work with fathers when challenges come up. They're very mommy child centric. Okay. And so they disregard the role of fathers. And so the father of that little peanut with her delicata squash, he would have birthed this kid if he could. He has been so involved. But when she was about 2 months old, he and I, as I was down there helping with this babe, and we were sitting out by the fire, and excuse my language, but this is a direct quote. They had a midwife, they had doulas, they had, lactation, they had all these professionals around them. And I said to them, that's the aunties and the mamas. That's the roles that we used to play in the olden days, right? But I said, but how are you doing? And he just looked at me with this really sad face, and he said, Anne, the thing is, nobody really gives a shit about the dad. Nobody asked me about what's it going to be like to be a dad. No one asked me about how I'm doing. No one asked me during the birthing process, you okay? You need a sandwich? He said, I was invisible. And this is today. Yeah, and he's a lovely, engaged, loving man who just got disappeared. That's not always, and I don't want to make stereotyping comments, but we still hear lots and lots of bias. When dads come into the systems, it goes way up. And race really plays a role. When you see an African American or one of our dads on our council, big Samoan dude, I just talked to him yesterday because he's going to be speaking for us at a really important meeting in a week, and he said, when they see me coming, anger management. He is the most gentle, loving, amazing man, but he's scary. He's a scary guy. So we have to make sure he doesn't hurt kids and women. So those biases are really, really hardwired. And so whether dads, I'll say it differently, assume that dads want to be involved, don't assume that they don't. And a lot of our systems assume that they don't.
Right. Thank you. Yeah.
Dieter, I'll go to you. Thanks for jumping in.
So I've always been on the periphery of all this. So that sounds like a big wah, 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 wah term. So I kind of get it, but I kind of don't.
Yeah.
So looking back at my own experience, and experience of my friends around me, is we all want that connection, but we have no idea what the hell to do. And no one bothers to tell us. You know, there's no told what to do. There's no, this is why it's important. There was very little information out there. And so I, coached my kids in soccer, incredibly active with my kids. I was, taking time off. That's why I worked for the state, because I didn't want to be gone all the time. I super active. But there just wasn't any real, like Ann was saying, we're kind of an afterthought. We're kind of there, and even from birth, because my, now ex-wife, but their mom, it was, my first son was born. It was a long, hard labor. They had to go and do a C-section at 1 a.m. and he wasn't crying. And so I had to pick to stay with her or go with him. And so, but there's no help from us. It's all focused on mom and the baby. And we just sit there. We're a spectator in our own experience. And so how do we prepare men for them? How do we support dads? Wow, I hadn't thought about that in 20 years.
Yeah.
But we feel we're an afterthought. We're a spectator, and too many. And I think things are getting better, because I see so many more dads involved. And I was coaching my kids in soccer and talking with dads, and much more aware, and watching what my dad learned, because he's old. I was born in '68, so dads weren't even allowed in the birthing room. You weren't allowed to be there. He got called at home, said, "Hey, you got a kid, come show up." So it's getting better, but we're still spectators in many cases. And we really we want to be engaged, but we don't know. We're fans. We're trying to do it, but we're not not often enough are we given the tools and support that we need to really know what the hell to do. So
thanks for sharing that. That's, it's a lot. Thank you. Really helpful perspective. Ron, I'll go to you. I see that you have your hand up. Thanks, Dieter, for sharing.
Yeah, I move that Dieter be allowed some whiskey in his coffee. Thank you.
Only if all of us are.
I really focus on the word relational. I've educated myself as a layman in the biology and the neurology of attachment and the ACEs study, all those things. But one of the key motivations for founding the Spokane Fatherhood Initiative happened in the late summer of 2016 here in Spokane. 3 toddlers under the age of 3 were murdered at the hands of their mother's boyfriends in a 2-week period of time. It was very unusual, just coincidental that was in that time frame, but it really got the community's attention. And so I've always had this interest in child welfare as a part of what we do. And my major focus in the conversation today is the social consequences of this and how do we change society. It is single parenthood that is really the challenge here. We started a mom's class 2 weeks ago, and asking moms about how has the role of mother changed from the time that they were a child to today. And they talked about this having to be the provider and this sense of being alone and having to do it all. The exact same words that we hear from single dads. And it's single parenthood. And so when we have fractured families, never married, half sisters, stepsisters, we lose all of the social benefits of grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins that are so vital to social development. So that's what I think of when I hear this term.
Thank you, Ron. And Jose, I see your hand up. We'll go Jose, and then Angie, I'd love to invite you into the conversation and hear from your perspective as well.
I was going to piggyback on some of the discussion so far. I think one of the biggest things that I see is this unrealistic reality for young fathers. And I'm not sure if it's the medical world that also is unfortunately contributing to this. And what I mean is when newborns are born, society still has this view that moms are the best for that. And when I do the fathering class, I find that a lot of dads haven't been told you have a role in the first week of their life. I'm a big breastfeeding champion and know that breastfeeding is highly, highly more successful when the partner supports it. And working in the WIC program, I see when there's a checkout in the dad's role in that early, but sometimes mom sees that role still as authority. So they're the ones that actually decide. The dad says, okay, formula feed or this. And I see that's the dynamic. So at least that I experience. So in my class, I noticed that's the first time that their eyes wake up and they're like, wait, what? I thought this was my 6 months to kick back. I have a newborn and I don't have to do nothing but just maybe change a diaper here and then. And the other thing I really that you brought that coach's perspective, what if we actually had I have a lot of families that are coaches, and I'm always hearing about these coaching certifications and how to be a better coach. But I'm like, why don't we have that for parenting in the WIC program that I'm in? I'm embarrassed that we still call it WIC. It should be PIC, parents, infant, children. And going back to my experience, I have 2 children, one born at the hospital, one with an amazing midwife. The difference in those 2 appointments was the midwife expected the family to come. And if you didn't show up, she was calling and saying, hey, why did your husband, or, she would encourage me, and we had such a rapport. And then she would also, and that led me to my and I love how Stephen was saying earlier, we're usually checked out. And I really was encouraged to do more as a dad. And that's why my perfect world would be to force legislation insurances that when prenatal, there's prenatal section for the partner. That is a requirement that you provide these classes for the partner, support the partner. The other quick thing in my tangent is I noticed that a lot of dads don't have the tools or haven't been told the tools of what a parent really is. They think that it's this extreme complicated thing instead of, no, it's just rituals. Repetitive things that you do, those acts is what makes you a parent. And that's what the memories that your child, but a lot of times I see that if they don't have that bond at the very first 6 months, it's hard. And I use this example. In my class, I try to tell the dad in that class, if you don't buy in right now, that when your kid is 6, 7, it's going to affect you and the kid in this way. Friday night, you get a call from your buds. Hey, happy hour. Let's go. Where's my emotional connection with my family? Sorry, they're kids. They'll be fine. Let's go party. Where if you maybe had invested time and it's more, then you would be sitting there like, my emotional attachment to my family is so much greater right now. I needed so. Those are kind of the things. And the last thing I'll just say is I see this concept of early relation as preventing ACEs, adverse childhood. I see it and I don't see it promoted enough in that. So my little tangent here.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jose. There's so much to pick up on in that, and we can. I do want to invite you, Angie, into the conversation, and then maybe we can pick up on some of the pieces Jose was sharing, especially about where we should head and what's supporting or getting in the way of early relational health. But Angie, I'll let you just respond to the terminology itself. And it sounds like you've been in this world or at least studying some of this, but I'd love to hear your perspective.
Sure, happy to share. I think the couple of pieces that might be slightly unique as compared to what we have already heard this morning would be kind of the connection to these bonded relationships to healthy brain development and a lifelong kind of trajectory of health and well-being. So it isn't just a point in time, right? It's a lasting kind of effect that can carry a young person through and have those really important long-lasting effects. And then I'll also just kind of offer as a follow-up to the comments from Jose and Dieter about how important it is to lift up dads and their role in the sense of you do have the skills, you do have the ability, you do have the capacity, you just need the reinforcement, right? And the encouragement to be an amazing partner in the development and the health of your family and your child. And so I think we sometimes lose sight of how a little goes a long way, and building, confidence and reassuring folks that you don't have to have a master's degree, doesn't mean you don't need help and don't need supports and connects, but you've come equipped with the things, and because you are the thing. And so that's a pretty critical component. And I just always like to reinforce to folks that you are the most important element in the equation, and you being there does a lot of it.
That's awesome, Angie. Thank you. Anne, I see your hand up, so let's go and then we can move on.
I guess I would just amplify that at the broader context level. We would never do this work without dads at the table, because their voices are so powerful. And we have leaders everywhere in across our state, across different roles. And so when people introduce themselves as just a dad, I always stop them and say, you are a dad, you are a leader, you are a powerful voice in your family and in this work that we're doing. And that's something that is just kind of coming into vogue, lived experience and human-centered design and all that. But dads have a really different take on our systems than we do because they've been experiencing the trauma that a lot of our systems perpetuate in families. And I think the thing that makes me excited is to reframe that into positive early childhood experiences. I get it that the ACEs work has driven us for a long time, but there are a lot of kids who do well with high ACEs. There are a lot of people who heal, and positive early childhood experiences needs to start really getting more playing time. And I think that's part of early relational health for us, is thinking about how do we make sure those happen with dad? How do we make sure that dad is there for all those positive early childhood experiences that create that wiring that gives us those lifelong successes? And then everything else just falls out of it. I really, really believe in those early relational experiences. And I think there's just lots and lots of things that we can do prenatally, perinatally, and in the first few years to build those bridges. We just have to get people's attention, and it is happening. I mean, Nikki, to your question, I think the other thing that's happening is people are now calling us. And, for the first couple of years of the council, we were knocking on doors. Hey, what about dad? What about dad? What about dad? People are now calling us and saying, hey, we get it. This is part of health and well-being. This is part of homelessness. This is part of drug and alcohol. I mean, all of these big bad outcomes that we've been wrestling with for forever play into fatherlessness, and fatherlessness plays into them. And so people are saying, wow, what about dad? So that's exciting. And so I just want us to always think about the hopeful side, because there's a lot of frustration, but there's also a lot of hope. And our dads are rock stars, absolute rock stars.
Yeah, I can already tell that for sure from the small sampling on this call. So let's maybe get in. I think different folks have alluded to different ways to help support. And obviously we're specifically talking about fathers in a lot of these cases in experiencing that early relational health or that emotional connection with their baby or toddler. But we also know that there's a lot of things that potentially could get in the way or be a barrier at varying levels in terms of experiencing early relational health. So I'd just love to hear from your perspective what you feel has both promoted or supported early relational health, or what seems to be getting in the way for some or many families. Yeah, Stephen, go ahead.
Gonna try and stay quiet during most of this conversation because you guys have heard it from me. I always advocate for dads, but I feel like, I mean, I'm definitely a part of this work. So I would say, like, in terms of supporting, that's one thing that I always speak about is just more resources for dads. I really love what Jose was talking about. Like, I've always thought, one thing I've said to the council is like it's crazy to me that a parenting class for fathers like isn't something that is like readily offered from the time that you're going to be a father. I always bring the story of all my friends that have had kids over the last couple of years since I've had a kid. I'm like, hey, like, do you feel, you always ask dads, like, do you feel ready? Are you ready? And it's like, most dads, it's like, hey, did you prepare? Like, have you been, I'm asking, hey, have you been reading books? And a lot of them are like, well, no. And it's like, oh, so in my head, my mind goes without verbalizing it, but, oh, so you're just gonna like carry on the generational patterns of like, the way your dad did it, you're going to do that, and a lot of us, because of trauma, I'm going to do it differently, but it's like, where are the tools? What tools do you have to do it differently? And there's just the lack of those resources, unless you, like I had to do, go and seek them out, right? Books that I knew would, hey, how can I be an amazing father to my child? Because I want to make sure I raise him in a very healthy way, emotionally and mentally and cognitively and all of that. So I think like that's definitely something that would help, is just more support, more resources for fathers, especially in this early relational realm, because it leads to that future relationship. So that's really what I think about in terms of what could help push things forward, and just as a better society. But in terms of things that get in the way, I think a lot of them have already been alluded to, like social stigmas. I think that's a big one. Is social stigmas is one that really gets in the way. But we've got a lot of hands, so I'll let them go.
Thanks, Stephen. Okay, I'll go to Dieter and then Jose and then Anne. But Dieter, please.
Couple of the barriers that I've noticed is when things are given. It's like it's Monday through Friday, 9 to 4. A lot of dads work. It's got to be evenings and weekends. You got to figure out another way to connect. I mean, now we have Zoom. It's a lot easier. People can jump in, but a lot of men that I've dealt with, especially younger men, are in construction or in businesses and things that they can't get away from. So you got to figure out when you're doing it. Second is when you say, hey, learn about the early relational health of your child, is not going to go over with a lot of guys, so you got to figure out a way to market it. Young dad, you need figure out something, reach out to a way, if you're going to market it, when they can actually be there, and then don't make it too surreal. I've got a master's degree and you're working construction. So how do we make sure that we get that messaging there to get guys want to come and feel comfortable? They're not going to walk in feeling stupid. So I think those are two of the biggest barriers that we have. What resources we do have are not at good times and they're not marketed right. So
awesome. Thanks. Okay, go ahead, Jose. Thanks, Dieter.
I think just going right where Dieter and Stephen were talking about, I think there's a lack of respect and a lack of dedicated funds to parenting resources. And what I mean, I'll start from education. My wife's a school teacher, but I always thought that school's role is to create great social people in our society, right? But one thing that I'm always seeing is missing is parent. We know every child at some point will potentially be a parent. And I'm just in awe that we don't do any classes in our nation about parenting until you're like an elective or in college. So the thing that I say with that goes to relationship discussions. There's no real training on how to have positive disagreements. And that's where I see that it falls apart for families when they have an infant now, the disagreements. So what I'm getting, I think what supports it is communicating healthy discussions and knowing that in a relationship you will have discussions, but you have to learn how to have them appropriately. But my perfect world, and hopefully this will answer, my perfect world that I would love is to have a parenting class at all the public libraries. And it's basically a parenting class on relationship, not because I think that's one thing that's missing. And then the other thing is in agencies and the WIC program, because that's really the only program that I can speak for, is there's no education on parents. We are meaning no support, only nutrition focused. But what's the point of talking about nutrition when the table is dysfunctional, and that right there is not going to work, and it creates ripples effect of negativity, authority, structure, and chaos. So that's what I'm really seeing. And the last thing I think is missing is a dedicated support for fathers' mental health in early. And I created a lot more anxiety when I became a father. It's not talked about until I met Jessup, who motivated me and changed me to do more. And he helped me see my issues. And like the first 9 months of pregnancy, it was chaotic, stressful for the dads, but no one seems to address that. And that's, I think, I wish the PQR9, that the depression, post-depression screeners, I wish they would require it for the partners as well. And those are the things that I'm seeing that are always left out, like you guys are seeing in these checkups, right? Or now, but yeah, sorry, don't want to take up. My brain's weird, sorry.
No, it's amazing. And you're giving very tangible examples of kind of actual things we can implement to change what we're seeing as the barriers and problems. So no, there's no apologies. It's really very valuable hearing your different insights. So Anne and then Ron.
So about 2 years ago, we did an environmental scan of father-friendly resources in Washington, and we got 27 fatherhood-specific programs, 27 in a state the size of Washington. So when we say there is a dearth of resources, there is a really, really, really small investment. And most of that is private money. Most of that is coming from the folks like Ron, who are out there just giving himself to this mission. And that's can't be right. I mean, so many of our dads programs are men who have lived it, and now they don't want dads to go through it, and they're stepping up to become mentors and start programs, and often they don't even get paid. And so part of it is, how do we increase men that with lived experience that we can diversify our workforce? Because so much of our early childhood workforce is young women, young educated women, and that's great. But for a lot of our guys, they want to have somebody that looks like me and sounds like me and has lived what I've lived. And that's very welcoming. And so how do we get more men in the field? How do we support men in these roles? How do we shift resources without taking money away from mom? It's not about that. It's about families. How do we think about it so that we get families? So we've talked about things like group prenatal dad visits, like in a practice. If you've got enough dads together, if it's a big enough practice, can you get them together to talk about what's it going to be like? What are you worried about? How do we support you? And then after kiddos are born, if they're not living together, how do we support that non-cohabitating? So we have a lot of never married and divorced families where how do we get dad in there for skin-to-skin contact? How do we think in the primary care system when mama is the presenting parent, asking questions in the family history and looking at social determinants, thinking about dad? Where is he? What kind of supports might he need? Do we do universal peripartum mood disorder screening for both parents? And then what does it look like if we're really shifting resources to support co-parenting? We just don't do it. We just don't do it anywhere. No one helps parents that are struggling, whether they're living together or not. Oftentimes we think about co-parenting with non-cohabitating couples, but there's all kinds of potential for things that we could be doing differently around supporting that couple to be able to successfully co-parent that we just don't think about. So resources, when we say a small amount of resources, it is really a huge equity issue because they're tiny. They're absolutely tiny. Less than 1%, I would say, in our state are public dollars invested in fatherhood resources. And so when Dieter says welcoming, it's like somebody that looks like me, somebody that's lived what I've lived is an amazing resource to dads. But I get calls from folks all the time about, hey, I've got this client out in wherever, and there's just nothing there. And so, how do we get into people's minds when they're designing programs and thinking about stuff? Get dads there to help you design it. When you're doing program design, when you're doing program evaluation design, all that stuff, get dads in the conversation because it'll be designed differently if dads are there. So get dads on advisory committees and councils and get them involved in these conversations, so that their voice is powerful when you're designing it, not after the fact, because then it looks like it was after the fact. And there's so much. We are out of time and I don't want to use up more time, but there are so many strategies, particularly around the healthcare system, because in the first few years, we know the periodicity is just super high. They're seeing a lot. Anyway.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ron, I'll shut up.
Yeah, go ahead, Ron. Thanks, Ann.
I think one of the biggest complaints we hear from the dads we work with is they're not being given a second chance. Many of the men, the overwhelming majority of men that we deal with come through addiction recovery, recently released from prison. Every one of our classes, just about every one of our classes this year has had a man wearing an ankle monitor. He's on work release. And so they're taking the step of getting fatherhood training to prove themselves worthy of more time with their children, but they see all of these barriers put in front of them, all these hurdles that they have to overcome, and there's just no real appreciation for the time that takes and the consequences of delaying father involvement in children's lives. So yes, there's all the caution that has to be associated with domestic violence and sexual assault issues and all of that, but I think that pendulum has really swung too far. Our overarching goal of all of our training programs is to give moms and dads the relationship skills that they need to overcome any relationship challenge they'll face in the future. So that regardless of my partner's behavior, regardless of my children's behavior, the relationship stays intact. That's what we're trying to do.
Thanks, Ron. That's great. Yeah, Sarah, please go ahead.
I'm curious. So Jose, you work at WIC, correct? Do you focus on fathers there? Or do you work with fathers?
I specifically, as Jose, I intentionally do. Now, if your question's more with what trainings were offered, nothing.
So what I'm curious about, is in small, maybe smaller ways than some of you would like, because we're looking for big change. You found opportunities in your context to introduce the idea of fathers being important and sort of change the narrative and do all these things that we've been talking about, provide resources. What have you found have been things that have allowed that to happen? Does that question make sense?
Yes, breastfeeding. The big drive for WIC is to promote breastfeeding, and knowing research, like I shared earlier, that we know if they don't have a supporting partner, we see a drop in our breastfeeding rates. So one of the strategies that I was actually piloting right before COVID, again, changed everything for me. We were about to host the first father breastfeeding class, only for fathers, and we were partnering with, long story short, we were trying to do it at 5:30, and also with multi-language. So that, I guess, if that kind of helped give you an idea. So really, that's really the only way that I've seen the focus in our WIC curriculums and our WIC trainings. Now, just recently, like you guys, the momentum is there. We're part of the other thing. I'm on the Washington State WIC Association, and because I joined that board, I made sure that our trainings that we provide include a fathering piece. And the momentum is starting to change, and we had a virtual conference, and we did have a section of dads. That was key, and so hopefully that gives you some ideas of what. But yeah, breastfeeding has really been the only, and that's why I'm really upset that WIC doesn't. The way I see WIC, I'm on my WIC tangent, is WIC is the entryway to the U.S. medical system, and because it's so important, over 50% of kids in our nation are starting on WIC in their first life. We set up parents so wrong, meaning, mom, come, bring your child. And that already sets a stigma going forward for a lot of parents. And that's why I'm so upset that we don't do any parenting in WIC. No development, emotional, the only thing that got the golden hour. have your husband or partner hold your baby and that's it. But what's after that? That's the tools that we're not giving parents. We're not telling them that you have the skills. All it is being a parent and being present and taking your child, walking with them, talking to them. That is being a great parent. And we're not providing confidence, in other words.
Sarah, can I add another quick thing? So we do these dad ally learning sessions for our providers around the state once a month, and we have had about 800 folks attend. So it's super, super cool to hear that people are interested. After one of them, I got a call from one of our WISE providers. Does that term work for you guys? So it's a wraparound mental health approach that has team work with families with kiddos that already have social emotional challenges. And this guy called and he said, Ann, I want to join this council. I want to be part of this work because this changed the whole way I do my work. So within his regulatory environment, so he said, the way I write primary parent and secondary parent meant that the secondary parent never got any communication. So now when I do intake, I change the way I do intake. We do WISE meetings and I realized dads weren't coming. So now I do WISE meetings at night, or if mom and dad can't be together, I do a second one for dad. Is that more work for me? Yeah, it is. But I do it anyway, because I got to do it. So found opportunities, absolutely. And we are always looking at that. What are the innovations that we can support, that we can nurture, that we can push along, pull and whatever. But ultimately, to get the big transformational change, we have to shift resources and we have to change policies that are hurtful. And there are lots that are hurtful. So, you know, it's a great question. And it is the whole work. The whole work is to look for that. But in the meantime, and then what's the long term? So, yeah. And if you guys have a minute on the way out, I could leave you with this really cool relational video that's like 1 minute long if you want to see it. And it's okay if you don't, but I just love pictures. Pictures speak loudly.
It would be awesome if you could put that in the link. I think that I have one more question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can do that.
In 4 minutes. The question is, what from your vantage point, in partnering with an initiative like what we're stating, which is, you know, trying to really make transformational change across lots of systems and build this movement, what could you use from that group or from us? I mean, we are assuming partnership here, but what do you need?
Your voice in all of the places that I know you have access to. We were just talking before this about private investors don't think about dads at all. And as you're talking to this group of people who invest in early relational health, raising that up and saying it's important for all the loving adults in a family to get the kind of support that they need. And that means we need to be intentionally focusing on dads. So that is one thing for sure. David Willis has really drunk the Kool-Aid now about dads. And that's fantastic because his voice is really powerful and he is all over the place. And so that we just have to keep raising awareness. And then secondly, your language, as you're talking about early relational health, calling out fathers and the relationship to fathers and how that improves outcomes for kiddos. We haven't talked about outcomes at all, but if you look at across the board, birthing outcomes, breastfeeding outcomes, early language development, social emotional development, you know, go across the board. There is a boatload of data about dads, involved loving fathers and the outcomes for their kiddos. And if you guys talk about it that way, and don't just say the word parents, talk about moms and dads and the important role that multiple parents have. And of course, it's not just heterosexual, you know, parenting. It's all kinds of family constellations, but it's the two brains interacting with that little brain that have different styles that create the social emotional competence in that kiddo. And if you talk about it that way, if you really call it out and we stop using maternal child language, that's going to go a long way from our world for sure.
Thanks, Ann. Dieter, please go ahead.
So real quick too, I think it's getting permission for men to do this, breaking the stereotypes, but also pointing out to women how important it is for men to be involved in their kids' lives and for dads to be there. And dads do parent a little bit differently, and that brings something that's a little bit scary and a little bit. I think the picture that Ann always shows is, you know, the dad that tosses the kid in the air and the kid sees it one way and the dad sees it another, and the mom thinks like the dad's throwing the kid 20 feet in the air and they're just playing and being silly and doing all of that. And so I think if we can get co-op moms into it too. They want to get dads involved and why it's important and how it's different. Bring moms in and bring the dads in. Make it safe for them. Make it this is what it is to be a dad. This is your role. You're important. And get moms saying, "Mom, you're important," because so many of the barriers, whether the dad's in their house or not, is the mom gets nesty or gets protective of the child, obviously, because it's their most precious thing in the world. They spent 9 months making this thing grow in them, they got to do this. And so how do we give permission for each other to share and the important role and be a little bit different, but you're still on the same team? I think would be really important to get that co-parenting push and get everyone there, because it's better for everybody. The baby, it's better for the mom, it's better for the dad when dads are actively engaged and positively engaged. It's so important.
Thanks, Dieter. Jose, I know we're just at time, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. And then Ron, if there is anything quick you want to share at the end, I'd love to hear that too. Just make a couple minutes extra.
Mine should be really quick. I think my ask would be more messaging to say the tools of fathers, they have it. I just think the lack of confidence is huge. The lack of confidence and the social view on a dad that they have to take a parenting class. Even I got trapped into that, right? You have to take a parenting class because I realized that the more and more I'm a dad, I learned my definition of a dad is not a future. It's not, I'm in the moment and doing these repetitive acts, like taking my daughter to pajama story time last night. That's being a dad. Things that, anything that can promote those kind of tools to dads and give them that upper hand, like, no, you're thinking of this too wrong. Just talking to creating rituals and being present. That's being a dad. You have it. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Jose. Ron, anything to close us out on in terms of thinking about partnership and how we might help support your work?
I just would encourage you to educate yourselves about fatherlessness. In the speeches I give around the community, I make these statements, and nobody's challenged me, that fatherlessness is the root cause of nearly all of society's problems. If you think about the consequences of fatherlessness on social welfare systems, on crime, and on educational, just those things alone, it's vast and it's pervasive and it's very subtle too. And so I would just encourage, there's tons of research out there, Ann and I can send you all the stuff that we're studying. And it's staggering. Let me just a quick 63% of youth suicide victims are from fatherless homes. 90% of all homeless and runaway children come from fatherless homes. 70% of juveniles in state-operated institutions, 85% of youth in prisons come from fatherless homes. I mean, the data has been out there for decades. And so I don't see how you can talk about relational health without talking about getting fathers involved.
Thank you, Ron.
Yeah.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you guys. And thanks for the extra couple minutes. Really, this has been such an amazing conversation, so insightful, so many new things we learned from you all. And thank you for doing all the work you're doing, whether that's in your family or in your community or the programs or systems that you're working in. Washington State is better off having you guys doing this work. So thank you. Just in closing, we're learning a lot from different communities. We are really interested in hopefully in the spring doing some sort of regional gatherings to kind of better understand localities and what's going on. So we will certainly stay in touch, but also if anything comes up, anything that sounds interesting, you want to talk about, connect on, please feel free to reach out to us. Obviously, Stephen is part of the steering committee, so he's a great person to connect all of us. So we just to say that the lines of communication are open, and we look forward to continuing to hear about your work and hopefully partnering together at some point. So thank you.
Thank you for building this bridge to fathers.
Yeah.
And thinking about it this way is just such a powerful opportunity to reframe a narrative that's really it's really tipping. It is a good time to be having this conversation.
Wonderful.
And thank you for giving us Stephen.
Oh, thank you for asking. So you know how this worked, you guys. It was one of those Willis moments where he's like, hey, I need a dad and I need him in 5 minutes. I'm like, David, these are busy people. They have busy lives. What are you doing? Yes, of course, I'll get you a dad. And of course, Stephen is a rock star. So
Yeah.
it couldn't have been a better match. But it's like, how do we do this everywhere? And, get Stevens everywhere in these really important conversations, because you see how powerful it is to have that narrative wrapped into a very mommy-centric, mommy dyadic-centric world. So thank you. And tell David hi next time you talk to him.
We absolutely will. All right.
Yes.
Thank you all. So
Bye-bye.
to meet
Be
you.
well all. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
sir. Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Jose.
Bye-bye.
And awesome. Hi. Okay, let me pause. Or should we keep recording or should I pause? Let me stop recording.